Going. Okay, so we're recording now. So good morning, everyone. My name is Jared Morrison, and I am an organization development consultant with the Learning and Organizational Development Unit with OSU Extension. I'm housed here in the Ag Admin building in Columbus, as well as our presenters this morning. Just want to do a little intro real quick to the program. So this is the ACEL to Extension webinar series, and we're very excited about it. It's been going very well. We've had a handful of webinars that were well attended so far, and the recording obviously being watched even more so. But that is ACEL to Extension is the Department of Agricultural Communication, Education, and Leadership, which is one of our partner departments here in the college. They're offering this series to Extension specifically to give us a little bit of professional development from some of our college faculty. So we're very excited that they came to us with this opportunity and that we were able to make this happen. So thank you, Scott, Beth, and all of your colleagues for making this happen. Today we have recruiting, selecting, and training volunteers. And our presenter is Dr. Scott Scheer within the department, so professor and interim chair of the Department of Agricultural Communication, Education, and Leadership. So without too much further ado, I'll pass it over to him and I'll be back on towards the end of the program. So thank you, Scott.
Excellent. Thank you, Jared. I'm really thankful that we have this partnership going on. I know Beth Flynn is too. Beth is sitting beside me, who is going to be driving the chat box, and I think when she's encouraging chat, just look for that little sign. So thank you.
And tell Scott that we've chat.
Yes, and to let me know that there's chat. But thank you, Jared, and of course Beth, and everybody that's participating today. On behalf of ACEL, we're just happy that we can reach out. I know a lot of us already interact on an ongoing basis with Extension, but this is a nice opportunity for us to have these webinars. They started in the fall, they're going on through the spring, and I know that the plan is for them to continue into next year.
Yes.
And to also include topics and whatnot based upon the Extension Roadshow that will gather information that you all folks in Extension are wanting to hear from ACEL. So I'm really happy about that. But today's topic is about recruiting, selecting, and training volunteers. And this is going to be a general overview. This is, as you know, very important in regards to what we do in Extension. Volunteers make our work happen. We're able to double, triple our efforts and quadruple because of volunteers. Just keep in mind, it is a general overview. We do offer regular classes just on, like we have one class called Volunteer and Human Resource Management. It is a UG class, and it's actually being offered right now. But just so you know, one of our benefits, as I guess this is a little commercial, but one of our benefits is that we do get tuition remission of being OSU employees. And so please keep an eye out, not only for our classes that we offer, but also really throughout the university. And so for folks that want to get a more in-depth understanding of this topic, and I know others, there are regular courses that are offered. You can do them just as, I guess you could call it audit. There's different options to take classes. Of course, for grades, you can do graduate non-degree. There's just different options. So just want to make a quick plug for that. As I think Jared and Beth were talking about, I think some of you all, of course, VETA was just due. I know an Extension, so raise your hand if you're happy that that's over with. I think you have a yes or no button or a thumbs up. That just was due yesterday. In our department, amen, yes, Katie. I'm very happy for you all because at ACEL, I pushed back the due date a little bit. I'm just sort of following the deadline that we've had in the past, but I think it's a good idea to have those due ahead of time. It just helps with getting all that material in, because then departments have to report that back to the college. And so wonderful for Extension to be done, and can move on to other things. So that's very good. Just what's important, I know my expectation is that yes, you're going to learn stuff from this, but we're also going to learn from each other too. There are some questions that we have that we'll use as we go along. And why don't we just move along here, and
Oops,
And I think we're both going to be sort of working this, but have a slide here. You can see click chat rather than chit chat, but it's sort of the same thing. So please chime in. And looking at the first question here is just thinking about what role do volunteers play in your OSUE program efforts and what they do. So please click chat into the chat box about what role volunteers play, just briefly, maybe a phrase or two, so we can hear what volunteers do with your programs.
Would it be okay if they spoke?
Oh, spoke too, please. Yes, do both. Thank you, Beth. Beth's been doing this a few times.
I just would rather talk than write.
Yes, so Katie or Julia, whoever's on video, please feel free to talk too. Or chat. I see, okay, yeah.
Starting to get some responses in the chat. So if you haven't opened your chat box, open it up so you can see Jared and Sarah have commented.
Yeah, very good. Master Gardeners, I'm just sort of going to share these as they come in. Entire Master Gardener program, they make everything happen. I see here, yeah, volunteers checking room hosts, calling sponsors, etc. Yep. Denise and Sarah. I know for me, when I'm working with some of my 4-H efforts, they're actually leading programs, whether they're serving as advisors or assistants or helping with special events. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's coming in now.
A little bit.
Yeah, so from Jennifer, they not only manage our local 4-H clubs, they assist with county programs, leadership board, camps, special events. Excellent. Partner along with our programs. I know you probably can read these too, right, everybody? So I won't read them word for word. So you can see from Katie and Francis, club leaders, everything happens in our community club. Lead special program efforts, more from Francis. Yep, special programs, camp, school enrichment. Yeah. So please keep chiming in. There's just a lot. Why don't we, and let me see, I can do this one maybe.
Yes.
Does that let me go forward or maybe?
It should.
Okay. Did that make it go forward? Okay, just want to highlight our objectives. It's really about those 3 things that are part of the title, and just learning knowledge about recruitment strategies, choosing and selecting volunteers, and just sort of the process of orienting and also training our volunteers. Those are our objectives. Another click chat here is just about volunteer recruitment and how you do that. And what is volunteer recruitment? If anybody wants to chime in of what that means and how you do it, either through, I see Lydia, support our county programs. You have some more Chadwick volunteers from Julia. When you think of volunteer recruitment, what's the first thing that comes to mind? How do you do that? Careful selection. Yeah. Want to be intentional, okay? Recruit from within the program. And maybe folks that might be volunteering already, but might engage them some more. Excellent. So please chime in on that. Maybe vested interest, that shared passion. Yeah, when you can have that match, that's very important. Word of mouth. Yeah, one person that's enjoying what they're doing through volunteering can connect with others. I just actually pulled this up last night. When you think about if we were paying volunteers, on average, what is their time worth per hour? Why don't you put that in an amount? I knew it was sort of up there, but I just pulled that up last night.
I'll be interested to see what the number is.
Yeah, I can tell you the latest number. How much do you think if we were paying our volunteers, we would pay them per hour for what their value and efforts are worth on average? You want to type it in, or
How much do we think we'd pay them, or how much should we pay them?
well, again, they're volunteers, and so in this case, and I know sometimes volunteers might have a paid stipend, but this is based upon data about what volunteers actually do when they're completely volunteering.
Okay.
If we were paying them, what would be the value of that volunteer hour if we were actually paying them? The value of that volunteer hour. 25.
Wow.
Well, y'all are wonderful. 18 to 20. I see Denise Johnson, you have the same source that I have. Very good. Priceless. Oh, that's even better. But excellent, Denise. That's the latest that I found too. 18 to 20, Jared. Yes. The $25.43 is from the independent sector from their surveys and whatnot. That's pretty impressive, and it just shows you how important volunteers are when it comes to what they do. If we were actually paying them for their volunteer efforts, for the value that they bring to our program. So I thought that was impressive. Excellent. Priceless. Like that too. So recruitment, again, is really about the process of matching what we do in OSUE with volunteers' needs, interests, and skills. And so that's trying to put, when you think about a box and pegs, you don't want to put a square peg into a circle. You want it to be a perfect match. Ideally, it's not always, but it's really matching what our needs are with what is happening with the volunteer's interests and needs. So yeah, very good. So what do you think motivates volunteers? What do you think motivates your volunteers? And just so you know, these slides will be available after. And so you don't need to try to scramble to take notes or anything. All right, Jared or Beth, I think Jared maybe sends them out.
Yes, Jared will send them out with an evaluation.
Yeah, go ahead,
But
Beth.
seeing on here, we're getting some responses.
Yeah. Sense of ownership, okay.
The relationships.
Their experiences, okay, excellent. From Katie and Jennifer and Sarah. Other thoughts about what motivates your volunteers? Yeah, wanting to make a difference with the folks, the kids, the adults, the youth that they're working with. Jared, yeah. Other thoughts? Yeah, seeing the whole process, yeah. So maybe it's some kind of weekend event that has a start and has an end, and you can actually see changes in the participants. That's nice. Food. Yeah, that gets me at a lot of events to this day. Want to pay it forward. Yeah, Laura and Andrea wanting to give back because of their previous experiences. Yeah, and I'm not sure of the data off the top of my head, but you can imagine participants in extension programs that were in it and might still be in it, but then they also volunteer because it was so important for them. And Valerie want to learn what we are teaching the kids. Yeah. It's a two-way street. It's a two-way street. Yeah, there's a lot of thoughts about who really is benefiting more. Sometimes volunteers might say, you know what, I think this has helped me more than the folks that I'm helping with, although the folks that they're helping with might think the opposite too. And so that two-way street is really huge. That often happens, which is really special when it does. There's a word called Volanuja that I came across that sort of gets at that whole point. Yeah. Well, let's go on and keep them coming in. I know we're going to be monitoring. Carrie has some too. Yeah. Practically speaking, completing a set of number required volunteer hours. Yeah. So they want to say, I want to give so much, and they can tangibly see that and be recognized for that effort. Yeah. And here's just a variety of factors that we know from the literature about feeling needed. Some of these are what you already have shared: donating time, helping someone, making new friends, spiritual need, obligation, share their own skills that they have, set an example. Here's that passion that they want to share. Maybe it's about a subject matter of working with something that they feel like that they're an expert at, that they can pass along. So there's all kinds of things that can motivate folks to volunteer. It's important to keep those in mind when we're thinking about our recruiting process. And so with volunteer recruiting, we're really thinking about their needs, the volunteer needs that we have, and having meaningful assignments for them. And using position descriptions, just like they're almost paid, because in a way what they're doing, even though many are not, it's still very important. And so having that What are the costs and benefits? We're going to look at these in a little more in depth. And then having a recruitment plan. You can go broad-based, targeted, and then repeat. It's just like shampooing, right?
Yes.
For some folks, but yeah. All right, let's continue with Click Chat. And so we're going back, we're going to go over the previous points about the recruiting process. And so, which includes a volunteer position description. And how many folks use a volunteer position description? I think it's maybe required, or not. I know, I guess it depends on we do in Harrison, yep. And Katie, who else uses a position description? I know we do with some of the ones I work with in 4-H. Hocking does provide it, yeah. We do, but it needs to be redone. Fayette, we do in Morgan, yes. Project Key Leaders, yeah, Knox, excellent. Wood, my guess is probably most of you do. I know sometimes we need to update them, and now might be a good time to sort of get out the brush and dust off the dust, brush off the dust, so to speak. Yeah, we'd like to see some examples. And so you bet. And what's nice is that if you go into like ohio4h.org, for those that are in 4-H, there are regular position descriptions. I don't have any with me right here. But that's something, you know what I can do? I can send some links out with Jared when we are finished that can give some examples. I know for what I've done in my involvement, like with the 4-H Cloverbud program, in our volunteer guidebook, we have a position description that goes over the skills that are needed. What are the obligations what are the obligations expected from the volunteer? What are the skill sets needed to be a 4-H Cloverbud volunteer? I'm sure with Master Gardeners. I'm sure if it's maybe a family and consumer science program or community development. And so one thing I will do is I'll have some examples that will be available when Jared sends out the slides, so you can look at that. So why do you think position descriptions are important? Why do you think they're important to have? I guess, here we go, but why do you think they're important? We can see, these are some that talks about why they're important that I have up on the screen here. I think it gets at what I just shared, that it helps identify the skills and characteristics needed. You want the right people. It also sets the expectations. Can you fire or let go a volunteer? And Valerie, yet to know if their actions are within the scope of the position. I think that sort of gets at that last question. So can you let go or fire a volunteer, or have you? Yes, we have. Yes, Angela, you bet. And does a position description make that straightforward? This is why we're having to move in that direction? And it's a rhetorical yes. And so there's a lot of reasons why the position description can be helpful. One of them, it lets the volunteers know what boundaries they have to operate in. And sometimes it's a clear violation of our policies, and sometimes the behaviors are it's clear that, hey, you can't continue. But sometimes it's just not a good fit, and that position description can help with either providing the training that's needed or for that volunteer to move on to something else. Yeah.
And Valerie just says that she uses standards of behavior more than job descriptions.
Yes.
So you have set that expectation for how people should behave.
Yes, Lydia, we can terminate about you bet. Standards of behavior in 4-H go hand in hand with that. That's right. And so that makes it very clear. And we can put that too in what is sent out.
Yeah, I'm writing down.
Oh, okay, okay, very good. Yeah. So a lot of reasons why the position descriptions are important. Let's talk about, again, this is a general overview about volunteer recruitment, selection, orientation, and training. So there's different ways to recruit volunteers. We mentioned earlier in that slide, broad-based or targeted. And this one is talking about broad-based. So broad-based is often when maybe you have a large-scale kind of event or short-term where you really need volunteers. Maybe it's some kind of service service event for the community that Extension is doing, whether it's a food drive for a pantry, or maybe it's because there's been some kind of storm where there needs to be some cleanup, and you want to get as many volunteers as possible to help out. You may have other examples that you can type into the chat. But so broad base, it's usually large scale, short term, and it's to have public awareness, to create public awareness based on reputation, effective for volunteer positions that need minimal training is usually the broad-based effort. We still have our mission, impact, and our reputation. We always can fall back on our mission and our vision that we have. And of course, with Extension, it's very broad-based. It's about improving the lives of people and communities. I'm sort of paraphrasing it, but it really covers all areas that we have, all of our 4 or 5 main program areas, impact and our reputation. So sometimes we'll do broad-based recruiting, and there's different ways of doing that. Here are some examples. If you have some examples, feel free to type those in. But depending on, this can vary from county to county. Sometimes it's just what? Social media blast, right? Some of you all have all kinds of Facebook lists that you reach out to, and that, bam, you can reach a lot of people. Maybe it's through Twitter. Some counties might use the local radio, or maybe some kind of community bulletin board. And you might have connections with the local TV even, and radio, and personal networking, directory. So there's different ways to reach out. That's usually for a broad-based kind of recruitment method. And so sometimes, though, we need to use targeted recruiting methods too, right? And so with targeted, that's usually for a more specific kind of volunteer effort that you need. And it's often for a longer term, it's not short term. And so those targeted methods that we might use could be, I would think, for some 4-H programs, maybe Master Gardener programs, Family Consumer Science programs, where it's not just an event where you're trying to get a lot of people. You're looking for folks where you can have that match with what the organization, OSUE's mission and needs are, that matches their particular interest, availability, and passions. And so with targeted, that might use some of those techniques that were up there, but it might literally be going up to somebody that you know in your community and asking them about their involvement. That, yeah, there's still an application process, there's still an interview depending on what it is, but that you feel like that there can be a nice connection, a match for that particular volunteer recruitment position. What do you think is used more often in what we do in Extension? Do you think it's more targeted recruitment methods or broad-based? And that might vary from county to county. Maybe just chime in through chat. Do you use more of a targeted approach for your volunteers or broad-based when you're looking for your volunteers? What do you use?
Katie said broad-based.
Broad-based, okay. Attempting to incorporate more targeted. Excellent. Very good. See, more broad-based, some targeted once in a while. Okay. Yeah. Personal recruitment, Valerie, by staff. Yeah, when you meet someone, you just never know during the circumstances that you might be in. Francis, broad-based for community clubs, excellent. Targeted for camp and key leader positions. Maybe those are more focused efforts that you're doing, Francis, yeah. Katie, broad-based. You want to find out about their interests first before you go more narrow and the objectives of what you're doing. Andrea, broad-based. Want to help on the best practice, be more targeted. Excellent. Angelina, more broad. Most come from relationships with current 4-H clubs. Yeah. I know sometimes, and I know when my kids were involved, when we're there on those initial meetings, that's often an excellent time to check in with parents or guardians about their interests in participating as a volunteer. And that matches, I think, what Angelina was sharing in her clip chat.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. So a mix, maybe more on the broad-based. It looks like I'm sensing a little word of mouth too that happens. One is not better than the other. It just depends on what your efforts are and what kind of volunteer that you need for your program, and the efforts that you need them to contribute. And so it just depends. Very good. All right, let's go ahead and continue. And this next slide looks at more specifics about doing the targeted recruitment process. And so you can see there's 4 steps. It's really about identifying the target audience, and that's thinking about who they are. And so you want to consider like their skills, their interests, their availability, because if you need folks at a certain time of the day and you know they're just not available, then that would be something to keep in mind. And then how it might appeal to them, that's again something to consider, but just be aware of barriers too. And those barriers are tied into those, such as availability, skills, and those kinds of things. So you want to identify that target audience. Then you want to think about the benefits and features that would be important in recruiting those volunteers. And so what does it do for them? Maybe it's related to that social interaction that's important. Maybe it's a way for them to learn new skills. Hey, fun. I mean, hopefully they perceive that it's fun. And so, and then also just keep in mind, you want to know about what it is, when, where, that program, that involvement that the volunteer would be connected, involved with for that program. And so then you also want to create a powerful message about how you're going to communicate with them. And again, that could be through word of mouth, but it might be through Twitter, it might be through Facebook or other messages, or other, not messages, but mediums.
Yes.
Mediums.
Media outlets.
Media, it could be the media too, but yes. And so that's where you want to connect our mission with volunteer needs. You want to be realistic, okay? And so that message is typically, it's simple, it's compelling, you know, what's in it for them. And so I was just pulling a couple to share with example. I'll give that in just a minute, and then you want to think about your communication strategies. From the research, it seems that it takes about 5 or 7 touch points for a volunteer to first learn about volunteering for something to actually doing it. 5 or 7 touch points. And so those touch points could be something they observe. It might be, oh, I might want to get interested in that. It also could be through any of the messages that you all might send out. It could be through word of mouth, but it's just not that one time. Often it's follow-ups that we have to do. And follow-ups are just part of getting that volunteer that has a wonderful match with your program. And so follow-ups are okay. I would use some caution when putting someone on a spot, like, I need to know now. I mean, yeah, I know you all don't do that, but unless it's the program's the next day and you gotta get off the ground. So yeah, let them have time to think about it. And so 5 to 7 touch points. But anyway, just want to give a couple of examples. One's here related to a master gardening program. It's just a message that could go out, a compelling message, and just want to read a little bit from it. But this could go out through, again, Facebook or something. But here it is. Remember when you were a new master gardener and felt left out or lost the first time you came to a meeting? This is about, just let me clarify, this is about recruiting volunteer mentors with Master Gardener program. And so this is probably using folks that you're familiar with. And so remember when you were a new Master Gardener and felt left out or lost the first time you came to a meeting. Remember all the questions you had but were afraid to ask. The mentor program will keep others from feeling as you did. A mentor helps a new Master Gardener by being a buddy, by helping the mentee feel welcome to the group and answering questions. And then it just continues about, if you're interested in spending some time in serving as a Master Gardener mentor and want to be part of this, please contact and name, phone number, and that kind of thing. And so again, this is something that was crafted within an Extension Master Gardener program. So that's an example. Just another one too, sometimes you just have to think about when you're crafting that message of what is that sort of catchphrase to get folks interested. And this is another one. This is actually from a JOE, an Extension article. It was actually directed toward baby boomers. I'm a baby boomer. I don't know if all these are just for baby boomers, but here are some things that might get potential volunteers interested. Everyone needs to be needed. We need you. Or your experience, wisdom, and talent are needed and valued. Here's another one. Life is a continuing journey with never-ending opportunities to learn, give, and grow. One more. Everyone has something to offer. How can you put your skills to work? So these are just some marketing messages that one can use. This is for boomers. I don't know. Do you have to be, for our young folks, are these way off if they're trying to recruit you? I don't know. For me, I like it maybe because I'm a boomer. I don't know. But this is from a Journal of Extension article for messages that can be used. So in thinking about the targeted recruitment process, identify the audience. How can you share benefits with them? What are the features of the volunteer opportunity for them? Craft that powerful message, and you have to have multiple touch points, okay? Usually one and done, unless you're lucky, doesn't always get it, okay? So think about these 4 steps with your targeted recruitment process, okay? All right, I'm gonna try to stay on track here. So this really gets at the second objective about how do you select your volunteers. So how do you select your volunteers? What are sort of the main things you do in regards for selecting your volunteers? So you have folks now that are interested. And before you can just say, hey, let's dive in, how do you go about selecting your volunteers? It might vary from whether it's a 4-H program or maybe an Ag Natural Resource or FCS or CD program, but how do you select your volunteers? Maybe either click chat or share. Yeah.
Starting to get some
Okay.
responses.
The interview and application process. Yes. Jennifer, Katie, application references, interview. Yes.
It takes a lot of time.
Oh boy, yes indeed. Yeah, definitely. And please keep click chatting. Screen through interview, application. Yes, Valerie. Volunteer informational meeting. Yeah, you just have a whole meeting about what it might be with what they're going to do, and your current volunteers give them a talk about what it really is. You don't want them to bite off too much. Yeah, excellent. And so here are some elements to consider. Oftentimes we have to do these, right? If you're working with youth and children, and depending on the situation, you're gonna have to do what? A background check, right? So that goes through your screening right off the bat. BCI, FBI, usually BCI, right? FBI, I know if you're coming in from out of state. I think it depends on how long you've been in Ohio. Interviewing and assigning. I think this covers a lot of what you all are sharing through the click chat. And so with that, without going into much depth, I know that like in 4-H, we have folks in the state 4-H office. I mean, there's just, and I think probably the other program areas too, there's just a lot of information about what has to be done. related to these elements, you bet. And we'll look at these a little bit, again, generally. Some Valerie's, yeah, present the population, what we work with, like, make sure before you go through the whole intake that there's a match. Yeah, because there's a cost to background checks, right? And I know, yeah, I know sometimes we absorb those costs, and of course, sometimes we don't, depending on, I think, the position, the volunteer position. And so let's do some things prior to going through some of those expenses. Is there a good match? And, you know, let's say there's not a good match. One doesn't have to mean, oh, sorry, so long. It might, hey, we're going to keep you on our potential volunteer list. Or we have this coming up where this program might be a better fit. Yeah.
And Valerie added, don't waste their time.
And don't waste their time. That's even just as important.
Yes.
They will value and respect that. That's right. Just the desired traits. These are just general ones. I mean, sense of humor, you don't have to be funny. And again, it's just, and sense of humor doesn't really mean that you have to be a comedian. It just means, I think, a positive attitude, which is up there already. Some maybe skills around organization and leadership can be a plus. That personal connection that gets at the match. Yeah. Flexibility is helpful. Flexibility doesn't have to mean when they're available. It can be depending on what you're doing. But just that if you have some tasks for that volunteer to be involved with, and when you're working with a flexible volunteer, you know they're ready to go for anything, that makes a world of difference. And I know I've seen that with 4-H programs that I've worked with, especially with the extension professionals who work with volunteers on a regular basis. And again, that's just that heartfelt desire to serve, right? It's amazing what that last point can do. If a person wants to be a volunteer, to make a difference and to serve, and they're genuine, my goodness, it really helps everything else fall into place. So that's a good one. All right, we'll continue with selecting volunteers and just questions to ask yourself. Is it a good fit for OSUE? See, I left the E out there, we're still OSU. Can you offer the position that fits their needs, wants, and expectations? Yeah, because if not, then we don't want to waste their time, you bet. And then this gets at just sort of the basics about standards of behavior. Will everyone be safe with this volunteer arrangement? Both the participants that they're working with and that volunteer too. We don't want to put volunteers in a position where it's not good for them either. And so these are just some questions to consider when you're selecting. And then that interview process is very important. And I know that programs have their own guidelines related to that interviewing process, questions, standard questions. And that's very important, which gets at why interviewed and just avoid traps. And so, you know, halo effect, like, okay, well, this person comes from a family that they've always had the best volunteers. So just be careful what biases, you know, one might bring to the table when we're working with selecting our volunteers and just stereotyping. Again, that could be anything, assuming what that potential volunteer might know or be able to do. And so just, you know, caution with that. You know, questions to ask is really about their skills and abilities and getting information from them. A lot of times we have sort of interview schedules of questions for that. Questions not to ask them, it's just like a job interview. How old are you? What's your marital status? How much do you make a year? I mean, you know, so those are questions that we're not going to ask. There's of course others too. And so keep that in mind. All right. Okay, quick chat. We're moving on to our last objective. We're still doing okay on time. I'm notorious for talking over the time frame, and I'm going to be cautious not to do that. And let's think about this next objective for our webinar today, which is looking at orientation and training. So how do you conduct your orientation and trainings? Just a quick chat on what you do in your county. Valerie, the halo effect. Yeah. Again, that's just where one is making assumptions about the potential volunteer that may not be true, based upon maybe their family, based upon things that you may have even heard by word of mouth. That's just, it could even be a rumor about somebody. And that halo effect is usually toward the positive direction. And so just caution with that. We want to try to be objective when it comes to that selection process. Yeah. So please go ahead and click chat about how you do your orientation and trainings for your volunteers.
Here's,
Oh yeah. But Lydia, right?
yes.
Presentation, hands-on activity. Yeah. So you're going to mirror maybe even some of the things that they might be doing, just to see how they can, especially if it's some kind, you're going to be doing some hands-on activities with the participants, you can actually have a presentation that includes that. Yeah. Presentation, hands-on. Yep, Lydia. Very good. Throughout the year. Yeah, so it's not just one time, it's ongoing. And so kayaking cross country, so you have all kinds of things that might be involved with. Mine are a bit different. This is from Jared. Maybe one-off events, usually meeting a week ahead of the event, morning, to go over their assignments. Prefer in-person trainings, yeah.
And Katie had one too.
Katie, new volunteer orientation, maybe some kind of presentation conversation with the folks in person with all new volunteers. And you know, sometimes we can make this a requirement, right? And you're going to have to attend this. If you can't, then please consider the next volunteer opportunity. You know, sometimes it's a way to start to gauge their commitment and that they're going to show up, right? And so just that first sort of orientation and training can help you know how to best utilize your volunteers. And also, to sort of give you a heads up, I might really need to make sure I engage intentionally with these folks. Maybe they arrive late or something, where you know your programs need to start, you know, on time. Are there some other ones, Beth? Yeah.
Yes.
We go on outings under the supervision of staff to learn the ropes. That can be very helpful in building collaborative effort, team building. Yeah. And learn the ropes. And it might be doing things that they're going to actually do as volunteers, right? And within the community. Excellent, excellent things that you all are sharing. And so when you think about orientation and trainings, did it turn? Oh no. Let's see. Okay. I think we got to just click over. There we go. Yeah. About similarities and differences. They are similar and different, but what might be a difference between orientation and trainings for these two? Yeah, usually with orientations, what we're doing initially, right? Trainings are often ongoing. You can do orientations throughout, but it's usually, you know, setting the stage, the climate for what the expectations are going to be for them through that orientation. And then trainings typically are ongoing. Oftentimes we have maybe even an annual requirement, even for our seasoned volunteers. Hey, it's our annual volunteer training event. I know when I go out to counties, usually it's for that. It's often a volunteer and their annual volunteer training event. Sometimes orientation, but usually that's handled almost within that particular local setting at the county. So yeah, orientation is usually more initially, and then trainings are often ongoing. And so with orientations, let's just look at what orientations actually involve. It's usually that welcome that you want to extend to the volunteers. It's going to describe what we do on a regular basis, and of course the expectations that we're going to have. You want to certainly establish that successful foundational relationship. And, you know, it still could be part of the screening process that you're figuring out, okay, where the volunteers might actually be engaged in the program. And you just want them to connect with what we're doing in Extension, with our mission and our vision, and build enthusiasm. And I know programs might have their own that can be under the umbrella of OSUE, and then our program areas, and then what that program objectives and goals are. That's a way to build excitement and really provide meaning about why it's so important that they're engaging as volunteers. And so, you know, maybe it's for a program where it's working with parents and young children. And one wants to, maybe it's through Family and Consumer Sciences, where you have volunteers that have maybe been part of this program before to help these new parents with their parenting skills. And so they can even share with them, hey, this is how the program helped me. This is how I'm better able to handle what I have to do on a regular basis as a new parent. And so again, it just depends on the program. That can be in 4-H, of course, and Ag and Natural Resources and CD. So you want to build that excitement and enthusiasm through oftentimes orientations, our trainings too, but you want to get off on the right foot. That's so important. You can bring in guest speakers if you want to, past volunteers, current volunteers, especially when it's the orientation is for our new volunteers. And so this gets at the training piece. This is often ongoing. It's usually connected to a specific volunteer position that they're involved with. Just be careful, even with our seasoned volunteers, not to just make assumptions about what they might already know, okay? And the expectations that you might have for them. So just be careful with the assumptions that we might make. And keep in mind too, that everybody maybe learns in a different way. It can be context specific depending on what the volunteer might be engaged with. But so learning style gets at things, whether you're talking about more auditorial and visual, you know, hands-on. Kinesthetic is more the hands-on. Usually I find, just for myself when I'm working with others, is to use a variety, because it's often hard to know unless you've done some background collecting on your volunteers. But it is context specific too, meaning that depending on what the expectations are, I mean, if they're going to be working with some kind of gardening program, for example, I mean, that's going to be, you know, hands-on, where they're going to be working with volunteers in a particular setting, outside often, because it can be some indoor gardening, but try to use the same kinds of teaching techniques, if you can, with what your expectations are going to be for those volunteers. But use a variety. That's usually a win-win kind of situation. And this is just some questions to consider. I'm not gonna read them all, but just sort of the nuts and bolts in training. You can look at these, getting at the knowledge and skills for the assignment, and looking at and valuing their experiences. That's important too. Just our volunteers, I know sometimes we have team volunteers, but by valuing the past experiences and current experiences and their skills and abilities, shows that we're interested in what our volunteers are bringing to the table. And that's certainly when we think about our adult volunteers, whether they're early, middle, or older adults. It shows that we respect what they bring to the table. We value them. And so whenever possible, have the volunteers bring their skills to their efforts that they're doing as a volunteer. And so that gets at valuing their experiences. Okay, so just keep that in mind too. All right, got to mention evaluation, because you probably already put in your triple ETs and all that good stuff. We're not going to talk about triple ETs or anything, although I don't know if Jared's sending one after this maybe, which is fine. For me, that's good. So I can learn from you all about doing this better. But for the trainings that we do in our orientation, we want to always consider how can we do it better, and that's typically through evaluation. There's many ways of doing that, and so it's really getting at the question, you know, was the training successful? It can be a pre or post test with some kind of standardized instrument. I know there's, I think, some that are online. It often gets at about knowledge learned before coming at time 1 and then time 2. It could have to do with attitudes and maybe expected behaviors. It just depends on what you're hoping to have the volunteers learn from that training. But you know what? It doesn't have to be formal evaluation. Informal evaluation is helpful too. What is that? That's just asking folks through a conversation. It could be later when you're wrapping up, but it could be through an email to them. And so you don't have to always use formal evaluation. It could be informal. Again, I like to say that's hallway conversation. That still can be valuable for us, right? For you, for all of us, and getting that feedback. And so learning is typically around knowledge. You know, behavior is where you might follow up to see, okay, this is what our training was about, to make sure that the volunteers are actually doing this with the participants. So they might be coming in to observe the volunteers, to check out their behaviors, to see what they're doing. And so there's different levels of evaluation to see how well our training is working. Don't try to, I know some people love evaluation. I'm probably in the middle of it. We're not going to poo-poo evaluation. This is to help us do our jobs better when we're orienting and training our volunteers. So think of it that way. Yeah. Does OSU do evaluations of the volunteers? Yeah, you're talking about what the volunteers are actually doing in their positions and collecting? Yeah, so that really varies from county to county on how you might do that, if I'm understanding the question correctly. So yeah, we do want to gather, yeah, good question. We do want to gather information from our volunteers to get their input. And I can put that down too, as maybe some examples to collect information from our volunteers. I have to rate each volunteer. This is Valerie. To rate each volunteer for the Cleveland. Oh yeah. So okay. Yeah. So you do that, right, Valerie? Yeah.
So I think she's looking if there's a standardized one.
Yeah, not to my knowledge that there's a standardized one, to my knowledge. But that's excellent, Valerie. Excellent. Yeah. So you do that already. Excellent. Yeah. And Valerie, I assume you give them some feedback then to your volunteers to give them guidance, is that right? Based upon how you rate each volunteer? Yeah. Yeah, especially if there's a concern, you bet. And then when they're doing well too. You know what? Everybody likes to be recognized in different ways. Sometimes it's just while they're volunteering, when they're done, I appreciate what you did today. It really made a difference in these folks that you were helping out. And so, yeah, if there's a concern, but also just as a way to thank them. And when you can connect it to what they actually did, that's a plus too. So good, Valerie. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's another.
Yeah, Francis, there's an evaluation example in the new yeah, there we go.
Oh, good.
In Box that I have used. Thank you, Francis. And so is that in Buckeye Box you're referring to, I guess? Adapted for other types of trainings. Excellent. Yeah, so they're there in the system. And so, and feel free to reach out. I think we have the list of all the folks that are participating. And so, of course, Francis's email, you can reach out. How would I access that? Good question, Valerie. Francis, I know, knows how to give directions for that. The thing about Buckeye Box is that I think it depends on, I think like in 4-H, I assume that everybody who is a professional maybe has access. I know when I go into my Buckeye Box, it's just, it's a long list. And so good question, Valerie. Francis can chime in for you on that one. And so it might just depend on your position, whether you have access. And usually what I mean by position is not like title, but program area. And so good question. All right, we are gonna stay right on time. And so just to Did you want to chime in, Ben?
No.
Yeah. And so just to summarize, this is really looking at our 3 overall objectives, and just that we want to be intentional and strategic about recruiting our volunteers. So what that means is just take a little time and thought when we're recruiting our volunteers, all right? Think about what skills, what the particular volunteer position is that you're recruiting for, and how you might go about doing that, highlighting the benefits, the features, and communicating that. And then when you're selecting your volunteers, think about that match. You want a good match. When you have a good match, it's hard for there's still gonna be a problem or two, but it's less likely. And so a good match is when they're able to match their interests and passions with what we're doing within our extension programs. And just orientation and training, it's really to ensure our effective volunteer outcomes. It helps them do what they're doing better when we have effective orientation and trainings. What I mean by effective is just that they're useful. It helps us move forward with letting the volunteer do good work, support the program, and then the trainings would be that ongoing piece. You know what? It's just like what we do every day. Not every day, but it's more like today, right? I mean, I do as a lifelong learner, you know, that's what trainings are about. Our volunteer trainings, whether it's that annual training event once a year, that's important. So that summarizes really what I think is important for us to take away. And just, I think we're right at 10 o'clock. Just want to take some time for other questions that you might have. Please use the clip chat. Any questions are welcome. Yeah. Please know that I will be sending out to Jared. I think there's I know Beth took notes for examples and stuff that I will get. And then also the slides will come out to all participants. Yeah. Other questions you might have? I think on that Buckeye box.
If somebody wouldn't mind sending the evaluation to either Jared or Scott, and we could distribute that. Oh,
here we go.
Francis,
thank you. Francis was working hard, and Laura too. We got a question. So Francis, I'll get to Laura's here. It's on the intranet. So that means it's hidden, but depending on, I think we should all have access to that. I think, not sure, if we used our OSU user name. Am I saying that right, Jared? OSU internet username?
I don't think so. I was going to say I tried and I don't have access.
And
so
did
I think
Denise
it's
access
just 4-H professionals, because
So
we get
I
access
wonder-
when we're hired on. But I can send it to you, Jared, if you want.
yeah, that'd be great if you wouldn't mind sending it to me, and I can get it included with anything else that Scott and Beth share.
Thank you, Francis.
That'd be
and
great.
then there's a question
Right,
about
is there a
in-kind.
system and extension to track volunteer hours as in-kind donations? I'm not for sure off the top of my head, please. I know some of y'all might be able to do that, because I know at different recognition events, sometimes it's based on, I know we often do it by, you've been doing this for 25 years. But what about hours? I don't know off the top of my head, but I know we've got smart folks on this webinar. Is there a system and extension to track volunteer hours as in-kind donation? Good question. Who was that question from?
It was, whoops, sorry about that.
Laura, good question.
And
Yeah, that's a good question. I've seen that done at other
So
institutions.
Master Gardner, thank you, Denise. Track hours by category. And is that through a software system, Denise? Yes. Is that just owned by the Master Gardner program? Maybe. So Denise is our expert on this. Yes, we have a different system from 4-H. So please reach out to Denise, but 4-H has a system as well, okay? I don't know if it's through our E237, all these software systems.
beyond my,
Here we go. I know y'all would come up with I also work with Prosper, Ohio. Excellent. D, Grant, and Iowa State. We have a great tracker, but it is Iowa State property. Gotcha, Laura. Okay, so 4-H has a system, Master Gardeners. So yeah, that would be a nice thing for if that, you know, we would had a general one, you know, OSUE. That might be something for the, what's that group called? Learning and organizational, that team. What?
Jared's group.
Okay, yeah, I don't know, Jared. Maybe.
Yeah. We
Oh,
I was gonna say, we certainly don't have anything right now. I could check with Advancement may have something. I mean, I know
Maybe
they track
Advancement.
some
Denise, go ahead, Beth.
Denise I was just gonna say that while you two were talking, Denise said they're working on one.
Thank you, Denise. Excellent. So to be announced, we're going to have one, it looks like. So excellent. Super. We use Volgistics, Valerie. Okay. And I'm not familiar with that. Excellent. I assume the Vol is volunteer. Volgistics. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but excellent. Y'all are on top of it. Yeah. I had a note here that learn a little from me, learn a lot from each other. And so clearly, Cleveland Metro Parks pays for it to track each hour. So y'all have that within your Metro Park system. That's nice. Very nice. Good. All right. I think we're going to wrap up. We're only a few minutes over. And so don't want to take any additional time from your day. Take a deep breath. Survey Monkey's coming out here.
So I did post a link. That's Beth had shared that with me. That's for today's. I'll also include that in the follow-up email. So if you don't get the link here, I'll have that in the email that we send out. But as Scott mentioned, we'll certainly include any of the resources that he mentioned in the slide deck that he used today for you all. And as I mentioned, it's being recorded, so this will get posted to our webpage for this webinar series, which is go.osu.edu/ACEL2extension. So that is the same page you went to register for these webinars. So where that register link was, it will turn into a recording link as soon as that becomes available. We usually try to get it up within a couple of days, if not quicker than that. So hopefully by next week, you'll see that. I wanted to say thank you very much to Dr. Scheer for coming on today and spending your time with us, and to all of our participants as well. It was a good engaged group. Like you said, Dr. Scheer, we had a lot of learning both ways here, or every way, I guess. So I appreciate that. I did mention we do have another, obviously our next round of the series coming up. So we have several webinars still to come, and as Dr. Scheer mentioned, we will continue this into next year. But we do have our next one coming up is in February, on February 20th, and it is stakeholder identification and evaluation, which will be Dr. Joy Rumble from ACEL as well. So please head to that site and make sure you fill out the evaluation so we can keep improving these. And I think that there's an opportunity to add future theme topic suggestions as well, so we can keep getting those as well. So I'll hang around for a few minutes if anyone has questions or thoughts or concerns, but other than that, thank you so much. And again, thank you, Dr. Scheer and Beth, for your help for today's webinar.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Thanks.
Take care.